Ron McCoy back with more of my real moments. And I just got back from going to Freakier Friday at B&B Theaters. And even though the review in the paper was not favorable, it was a really entertaining movie. Kind of a hodgepodge at first, but it definitely came together and we enjoyed it immensely. Gave me the opportunity to talk to Kaysen, who lives across the street, who is aspiring to work at Ross, although I sometimes get the feeling he really truly has trepidation about doing that. At Ross, the place where I work, the issue is, should I become a manager of some sort? And people seem to think I would do a great job at it. Interestingly enough, I've mentioned in a previous segment that I don't feel appreciated, but one of the workers, Lizzie, who has an English accent, asked Jacob, who is the current manager, whom I might possibly be replacing, asked him, and there are no secrets in this place, if I was still working toward being Jacob's replacement. And Jacob says to Lizzie, there are no secrets in this store. Oh yes, we sent in the email about Ron, and we said, we told them that Ron was like the model Ross employee, always on time, and so forth and so on and so on. I heard more compliments from him when he said that than I have in the whole more than 8 months that I've been there. And it's like, really? Also, I learned that the woman who asked me to apply or to interview for that position is actually the assistant store manager. I knew she was a manager, but I didn't know she was in such a, such a vaulted position. Communication is not the best in that store. I don't know why. It's like somebody new is hired and no one ever knows who that person is, and I'm just friendly, and I introduced myself when I was in teaching, and I will say this, at least we would get an email explaining who was who. Now, they never did go around and introduce people in the school where I worked. You had to, do that yourself. But I don't really feel like I ever get any information. And should I somehow get promoted to a manager of sorts in that place, I have a number of ideas that I would like to implement. One of those is to start an email newsletter where every week or so I send an email to the whole staff telling them about new people who are starting, information about like upcoming events, like, oh, well, we are about to have an inventory in the store, so be prepared. Or they're going to be coming in overnight and cleaning the floors, so stuff is not necessarily going to be in the same place it was the previous day. I also want to implement, like, perhaps have staff members adopt areas of the store that they are responsible for, taking care of. For example, I might be in charge of the men's section, and Lori might be in charge of bed and bath. She kind of likes to organize the sheets and so forth, where when you have extra time, you are taking care of your area and making sure it's all spiffed up. Now, I don't know if it violates Ross policy, but I'd like to put little plaques in those areas that say, this section is maintained by Ron, or whatever the case is. Kind of like people adopting highways and keeping them clean. Who knows? I know there are certain policies that people who work at Ross must adhere to, and chances are a lot of my ideas might violate that, but I guess I would have to run those past the assistant store manager, Kelly, before any of those changes could occur. Well, I would be driving Kaysen to work, so he has to be there at the same time I am, 5:45. Well, he told me this evening that he doesn't get up until 2 p.m. He stays up all night and then goes to bed, and I said, well, you're going to have quite an adjustment. I talked to Jacob today and asked. Jacob had mentioned that when you apply to work at Ross, you should be the one to call the manager to set up an interview. Well, I didn't do that. They called me. So then I mentioned before I left today, should Kaysen call? He said, "Oh, I'll just go and call him right now." Oh, okay. So then we went back to the office, and Jacob looked Kaysen up among people who have applied to work at Ross. Well, there were a lot of people who have applied to work at Ross. I had no idea. And he sifted through all of this and found Kaysen's name and called Kaysen as fate would have it. Kaysen didn't pick up, I guess because he wasn't up yet, and had to leave a message. And then this evening, Kaysen said that he had heard the message and called at 3 o'clock, and the appointment for his interview is set up tomorrow at 11:30. So we'll see how that goes, although after I described to Kaysen what he would be doing, I get the feeling he's not too enthusiastic about it. So we will see how that all works out. Not to disparage Generation Z or anything like that, but I just get the feeling sometimes, and my sister Susan was telling Kaysen and Laura, my niece, that they are going to have to start working full-time jobs eventually. And they've never had a full-time job before. They worked for Walgreens, like south of Liberty. I guess there's a distribution center out there somewhere. And Kaysen was mentioning that they worked overnight. They worked 8 hours, but they only worked 3 days a week. They got $16 per hour, whereas at Ross you get $14 per hour. My sister Sandy just got hired during the interview to work at Home Depot. She's going to be working in an office from 5 a.m. to 9 a.m. She's going to be doing cash office duties like I get to do sometimes at Ross, so we'll get to compare notes. That should be interesting. This was the first day of school, and while yesterday I was kind of missing the idea of not going back to school after having 40 first days of regular school, and I didn't really think much about it all day long. We got over to the theater. There were very few people in the parking lot, and my niece Laura said, "Oh, it's because today was the first day of school." Oh, it was the first day of school. I have to admit that if this had been the first day of school, I would never have gone to a movie that evening, and I would have been apprehensive about how the first day would go, and I would also be apprehensive about the second day, and I would also probably be apprehensive about the third day, although probably not as much. Pretty much the whole time I taught, I was apprehensive about how things would go. Whereas at Ross, sometimes I get a little bit edgy about how things are going. But, anyway, I was complaining to myself, anyway, about one of the workers. She never seems to want to do any work, never wants to run Hummers or anything. But she was telling us, Jacob and me, this morning about her brother, who at age 48 in May had a stroke, a hemorrhagic stroke from the way she described it, just like my mom had. And he's very disabled. He's partially paralyzed. It affected 3/4 of the right side of his brain, was fried. And he has trouble with language. He recognizes everyone, has trouble walking because he's, kind of stiff and that kind of thing. Can't work and stays at her house all the time. And her mom, this is a woman who's only 32 years old, but her older brother is 48. And she has a sister who's even older than that. She's early 50s. And they're all having a lot of problems. Her mom has trouble getting up and down steps. I would imagine her mom, if she has a son and a daughter who's late 40s, early 50s, would probably be in her 70s. So this girl, Grace, has really got a lot of burden. I mentioned her in the last segment. Her kids go to Liberty Oaks, and so she has a lot going on. And we talked at length about all of her travails And I shared with her the travails of my mom, who was 87 when she had her stroke, and how truly devastating it is to have to endure such things as those. So it kind of helps give me insight as to why Grace is not always willing to work as hard as I think she should work. Goes back to the old adage, walk a mile in another person's shoes, and then you get an idea of what that person is going through. My mistake with my mom's stroke and all was I never did confide to my administrators or my fellow teachers all of the agonies that I was enduring. My mom had that hemorrhagic stroke on January 13, 2023. And, of course, the hospital visits and staying at Norterre and dealing with her at home and all of this. She was supposed to die that weekend, and she didn't. And she lived another year and 9 months, and it was in and out of the hospital, in and out of Norterre, in and out of Addington Place, ultimately. And I never did share. I wanted to be strong and go back to school. I didn't want to miss any days of school, and I didn't. And I have a feeling, and I said that this morning at Ross, I have a feeling all of the pressure that I was under and everything we were dealing with affected my composition and my patience. And I was never a very patient person, but I have a feeling that sped up my eventual departure from teaching, all of the atrocities that I had to endure. Well, we will see what tomorrow brings with regard to Kaysen and his interview, and what tomorrow brings with regard to the possibility that I might be moving into management. I have a feeling interesting things are coming.